You're listening to a CNA podcast.
Thailand's most infamous gorilla, Bua Noi, is an animal out of place. How did she get here, this majestic creature, in the confines of a shopping mall zoo in Bangkok? Her owner says she was brought here legally after being born in a German zoo. But others believe Bua Noi's journey stretches back through forests, across borders, and is embroiled in a murky global trade that back then rarely left a reliable paper trail. And another question lingers. What does captivity do to an animal who has lived this way, away from her natural habitat for decades?
At the back of my mind, is Bua Noi still there? Or she's still up there? What's she doing up there?
I mean, it would be pretty sad if that animal dies on the top of that shopping mall.
We do hope that she could survive with this condition forever.
I'm Jack Board from CNA Podcasts. This is Behind the Glass, Bangkok's loneliest gorilla. Let me take you back to the 1980s, to the lush jungles of Central Africa, and to Equatorial Guinea, a country emerging from one of the continent's most brutal and repressive periods. It was devastated by a regime that had killed or expelled 1/3 of the population. Infrastructure was failing, borders were porous, corruption was rife. Capturing wildlife was a survival strategy, especially for rural communities. And in this part of the world, that wildlife included Western lowland gorillas. Daniel Stiles, an illegal wildlife trade expert based in Kenya, has scoured decades-old records of great ape trade and done extensive research on the origins of Bangkok's solitary gorilla. By the 1980s, European animal dealers were already operating across Central Africa, and Equatorial Guinea's lack of controls made it a safe base.
It was a German father-son team of animal dealers who typically operated in illegal fashion. What they did in Central Africa was to put out their collection teams to capture baby gorillas and then export them with dodgy documents or no documents at all. I mean, they were doing this on a regular basis, supplying zoos and making quite good money from it. And there were a lot of these zoo safari park type places springing up in Thailand in the 80s and 90s. They wanted great apes amongst other animals.
The Western lowland gorilla is the most common of an endangered species. There are an estimated 316,000 individuals in the wild. But their numbers are rapidly decreasing due to a mixture of disease, poaching, and habitat loss. There are international laws that regulate the movement and trade of endangered species. The main instrument is called CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. Under CITES, gorillas are listed on Appendix 1, meaning commercial international trade is prohibited. Thailand ratified CITES back in 1983.
CITES keeps a trade database, and there are records of very few chimpanzees and orangutans coming into Thailand, but they're getting hundreds of them. I mean, Pata Zoo is not the only place with chimps and orangutans. They're pouring in there all the time for these entertainment places. And there was no record of a gorilla coming in, with the CITES import permit.
Any legal trade of a gorilla into Thailand would be tracked by CITES. But looking at these records, there are no gorillas listed as legally transferred to Thailand from Germany or from any other country between 1980 and 1995. There were concerns at the time about animals being illegally trafficked out of Africa. In 1988, the CITES Secretariat sent a letter to parties warning them not to accept the import of animals from Equatorial Guinea. For the record, Pata Zoo says that Bua Noi's import was legal and occurred before Thailand's wildlife laws were enacted. When a country ratifies CITES, it is legally bound internationally, but it must pass national legislation to enforce it. Thailand had wildlife legislation in place at that time, but questions remain about how fully CITES provisions were being implemented and enforced under domestic law. Daniel and others state there's no credible evidence that Wanoi was captive bred. Gorillas in captivity are also tracked in what's known as an international stud book, a global registry recording every individual, their parents, and where they've lived. It's essentially a family tree for the world zoo gorillas. The European stud book covering Pata Zoo shows 2 gorillas. One is Bwana, wild-born in Africa, transferred into private hands, including a German zoo, a few times, before reaching Thailand in 1984. And then a second gorilla, Wanoi, wild-born, and transferred to Pata Zoo in September 1987. Thai officials have said that there is no clear violation under current law that would justify confiscation of Wanoi. The zoo holds a valid licence, and there's no legal order to seize her. I reached out to Thailand's Department of National Parks, Wildlife and Plant Conservation, the DNP. They formally turned down my interview request, only saying that Wanoi is legally owned by Pata Zoo, and that any interview about her may infringe upon their rights. If I wished to obtain more information about her, the department said I should contact Pata Zoo directly. But Pata's representatives declined to be interviewed as well, or to make a statement. Wildlife trafficking remains big business today. Southeast Asia is widely recognised as a core node in global wildlife trafficking networks, acting simultaneously as a source, transit point, and demand market for illegal wildlife. The OECD, an international body that tracks economic and policy data, estimates that this region accounts for up to a quarter of global demand for illegal wildlife products, from pangolins and turtles to elephant ivory and bear parts. Interpol and other agencies estimate the illegal wildlife trade to be a multi-billion-dollar industry, making it one of the most profitable illicit trades after drugs and human trafficking. One man investigating this dark and opaque world is Ricardo Forrester. He's the Deputy Director of Freeland, a team of law enforcement and technical experts trying to find and stop traffickers.
The project I work in Asia looks at law enforcement capacity building, especially in hotspot zones, those being borders between Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, Laos. So I focus mostly on law enforcement capacity building, well-versed in open source intelligence, mapping, data and analytics. I would argue if I were a career criminal, I would be involved in wildlife trafficking because I can pick and choose where to transport an animal to and from, because there's no homogenized legislation, for example, in ASEAN. It all depends on the legacy left by the previous colonizers. So different countries take a different stance towards wildlife trafficking, where in some instances you may get jail time, in other instances you may only pay a fine which is not even commensurate to the proportional value of the product in the final market, so therefore there's no real deterrence to committing this type of crime. So when you look at the risk and the reward ratio, the risk is minor, the reward is massive.
And it's that imbalance between weak enforcement and high reward that has made parts of Southeast Asia so attractive to traffickers. In that kind of system, animals move quietly across borders, through paperwork, and into places they were never truly meant to be. The rules of the game were a lot different 30 years ago, Ricardo told me. While the routes, laws, and players have changed, the trade itself hasn't disappeared. In fact, Daniel Stiles says in some parts of the world, it's more lucrative than ever.
In fact, it's more organized now, a lot more organized. There are regular networks now of people doing this. I've been investigating a wide variety of types of live animal trafficking and the product trafficking. They're done in different ways, largely by different people, but they share certain characteristics. And these are transnational organized criminal groups. Networks have emerged. It's big money. I mean, these guys make big money. But more and more the public is becoming aware that these are not great places. Just like circuses have more or less become extinct in the West, I think these types of animal exploitation entertainment places will eventually go, mainly due to public pressure. They're still going strong in the Middle East, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and China. They're still quite active. In fact, in the Middle East, they're expanding. UAE, they're expanding like crazy. More and more of these private zoos are coming up all the time. And they want great apes, and they want big cats. Those are the top of the list of things that they want.
In our lives, we've all probably visited a zoo. I remember as a kid growing up in Sydney, Australia, and the joy of a rare excursion to Taronga Zoo. These places are promoted as bastions of nature conservation, important breeding centres and educational tools. Not all zoos are made equal, though. How did we come to treat animals like Buanoi as spectacles? Something to look at through glass or through a fence? And what is it, especially when it comes to great apes, that draws us to that spectacle? To see wonder through the eyes of a captive animal? I spoke with Ian Redmond. He's the chairman of Ape Alliance, a major conservation organisation. He's a primatologist and a naturalist who has worked with wild gorillas for half a century. There's hardly a wiser voice in the world on understanding these animals.
When you're with gorillas in the wild, it is really obvious to everyone who visits. And now of course, there is gorilla tourism, so anyone who has the money for the airfare can get themselves to Rwanda and buy a permit to go and sit for an hour with a family of gorillas. I watch people doing this. I take people to see the gorillas, and you can see their sort of understanding of themselves is changed by meeting other beings that are not human beings. And when you meet a non-human being, like a gorilla being or an elephant being, in a situation where they're not afraid of you and you're not afraid of them, so there's mutual trust, and you exchange a glance, and it's a glance between two minds. And it's that exchanging a glance which really enlightens the human observer that this is not just an animal. And curiously, in Rwanda, the language, Kinyarwanda, doesn't classify gorillas in the term that is used for wild animals. Just as in Malay and Bahasa Indonesian, orang doesn't mean animal, it means person. And orang hutan is person of the forest. So interestingly, those two languages of people who have for thousands of years lived alongside apes regards apes as being not just animals. They are beings. Now, you get to the point where a civilization that doesn't live alongside apes and just regards non-humans, all of them, as just wildlife, sees forms of animals that are amazing to the naturalist's eye. First thing you want to do is to take one home and show it to your friends. And that's how zoos began. And if you've got really weird animals, other people are fascinated. So you get this reflected glory. And it's this sort of status symbol of having a pet or an animal in your control, which then can be turned into commerce because people will pay to have their eyes widened and, whoa, look at that, I haven't seen one of those before. And then suddenly you've got a whole industry based around grabbing animals from around the world and bringing them into a zoo and charging people money to see them. Or in less enlightened times, teaching them tricks and putting them in clothes and making people laugh. So in China and Southeast Asia, you still see animals dressed up in doing daft tricks to entertain family audiences, and the audiences love it. But the life of those animals is pretty miserable. Once you get beyond the, isn't that funny, they look a bit like us, to, oh, actually they are a bit like us. They have minds, they have emotions, they have aspirations, they have a social life, which in the case of Buanoi is limited to her keepers. And I suspect, I don't know because I've not met them, but I suspect those keepers and that lone gorilla have a very important social bond. So I don't want to dismiss that. It's all Buanoi's got. The keepers go home and they have a family. But she's only got the human contact. And you're seeing a gorilla going around in a cage, but it's not connected to its environment. And when you see a gorilla or any other wild animal that is part of an ecosystem and you sit and watch for a while and you start to sense their world, it's a rich world, full of sensory stimulation. Every time they brush past a plant, every time it rains, every time they scuff their knuckle on a rock, it's input. And she's in this little box with very well-meaning humans who bring her food every day. but no guerrilla company and no connection with the natural world. I think it's probably the worst punishment we could confer. When people have done really bad things, they're put into solitary confinement. That's the worst thing we can think of doing to a human. And yet we do that to non-humans without a thought. And right now, in our current crises of biodiversity loss and climate change and pollution, we need their help. We don't want to keep them in a cage to show our children and make them laugh. We need them in a forest where they evolve to play a really critical role.
Ian told me that the global zoo industry does have a role to play. Many put a percentage of their annual turnover into the real conservation of habitats. But he argues that by using animals as an attraction, they've still got a foot in both camps. His idea? Turn them into virtual reality centres. Experience animals with a headset on. See the animals without disturbing them. It might even work at Pata, he says. There are a lot of people around the world who want to make sure Buanoy steps on real soil once more in her life. In the next episode of Behind the Glass, the fight to release her.
Hello, Mr. Canet and dear Thai ministers. This is Cher, co-founder of Free the Wild, speaking to you today about the animals at Pata Zoo.
We couldn't get any meetings, nothing happened. And it just really blew out the spark that we had.
If we don't say this anymore and let the cause take its place, let Buanoy pass her last breath up there, that will be the time that he will feel sorry.
Behind the Glass was researched and written by me, Jack Board, edited by Tiffany Ung, sound designed by Ken Delbridge. Our social media editor is Joanne Chun.